To fully understand the purpose and intent of the United States Constitution, you start talking about, let's go back to the original intent of the Constitution. The original intent of the United States Constitution was to be the first affirmative action plan in the United States. And it was designed strictly and solely for whites. It was never designed to include black people in it. Black people were intentionally left out of the United States Constitution. And if you were to go back, if you want to check on some of these things, go back to the Bill of Rights and start right there. Start reading where it says in the beginning that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among those rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, they wrote those lines at the same time they were trying to figure out how to enslave black folk, because they had met and spent an entire week in Philadelphia trying to say, if we're going to become the cradle of democracy, how do we justify not allowing black folk to be a part of the benefiting class? And finally they said, well, what we'll do, we'll change and use certain words in the Constitution that will exclude them or give the pretense that they were included by using very broad and ambiguous terms. And so they said in the preambles that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They knew at that moment that black folk would never intended to be treated equal, that they're gonna hide them as slaves, and that was the purpose, that black folk would be a subordinate class so whites could get over on them. Now, if you were to go back to the Constitution, look at the first the first part of the United States Constitution, where it says, "We," and this is the preamble to Article 1. "We are the people of the United States." Now they said, "We the people." The "we the people" they were not talking about black folk. No place in the Constitution they call black folk people. The black folk were defined in the Constitution as being property, as being 3/5 of a human being. They were dehumanized and left as non-civilized human beings, and that they would be equal to field animals. So whenever the Constitution used the word, those very broad and big words like "we the people" and "all the people" in the Constitution, they are not talking about black folk. That's why when you start reading the first part of the United States Constitution, it starts off saying "we the people." And it says that we secure in our blessings of liberty, and they knew at that point that black folk would not have any liberty, and ourselves and our prosperity, and shall be consistent, blah, 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 with everything except for certain people. There's certain species of people. They were talking about excluding black folk. And so consequently, throughout it, it says those who could not be able to would be eligible for these benefits would be those individuals who are bound to servitude, those individuals who are indebted, those who are in bondage. Those are the broad, ambiguous terms they use for black folk. They didn't say "we the people" and "all the people." That's not the same as those indebted and those in bondage. And then that would be in Article 1 of the Constitution for those who are interested in reading it. Or if they want to, they can jump over right quick and run over to a couple other documents in the Constitution. Like a Constitution Amendment 5 says the same thing, that certain people will be held in bondage and they would be excluded from the benefits of this country, of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They would be classified as property in the Amendment number 5 in the Constitution. We can go on and on, but the issue is very simple, that the Constitution was the first affirmative action plan for white folk, and so anybody wants to go back to the original intent of the Constitution, all you got to do is just go around and gather up all black folk and put them back in the cotton fields and give them cotton sacks and tell them from now on they can have no family, no religion, no organization, no education, no money, no wealth, no power, no fruits of their labor, and no children. That they'll be there, they'll be a servant to everybody but themselves, and they will produce wealth and comfort for everybody but themselves. So that's the original intent of the Constitution. It's all through the Constitution, but unfortunately nobody reads it, or those who do read it don't understand it, especially and amazingly of those who went to law school and supposedly studied law and studied the Constitution and know absolutely nothing about it, what the intent was.
Impediments to empower and economic justice. Blacks ought not swallow beliefs that they cannot digest. And that's a quote from Dr. Claude Anderson. The U.S. Constitution has historically been and continues to be an impediment to Black political and economic empowerment and self-sufficiency. During the formative years of this nation, the Constitution outright excluded blacks from the privileges of citizenship and acquisition of wealth and power and the enjoyment of the fruits of their own labor. Moreover, the Constitution shackled blacks so that members of the majority white society and any other ethnic or racial group could use blacks for socioeconomic gains. The social acceptance and grants of wealth in government has given to European, Asian, and Hispanic immigrants, but withheld from blacks, left blacks decidedly ill-equipped to compete with the more advantaged groups. Worse, the Constitution is again being used to block even the slightest effort by blacks to redistribute resources to remedy the wealth and power imbalance between blacks and whites. Conservative forces within the court system and government now seek to maintain the status quo of inequality between the blacks and whites by mandating that blacks and whites be treated equally in all future endeavors. Any efforts whatsoever to correct past injustices are found to be unconstitutional forms of reverse discrimination against whites. Thus, equal protection has come to mean the equal treatment of fundamentally unequal groups, which in effect perpetuates the unequal distribution of wealth, power, and resources. White society enjoys a virtual monopoly over wealth, power, and governmental and business resources because to a large degree, the Constitution decrees that whites would solely possess those advantages. Equally for blacks, therefore, amounts to anything other than equal ownership and control of resources and power because the Constitution set the legal, civic, and racial tones of the nation and placed numerous impediments and obstacles to black empowerment and self-sufficiency. The following is an analysis of the obstacles that the Constitution has used to impede black people's progress. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Happy Monday and welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. I am Joseph Ward, continuing my reading of Dr. Claude Anderson's book, Black Labor, White Wealth, The Search for Power and Economic Justice. And we're on Chapter 3, Impediments to Empowerment and Economic Justice. And Chapter 3 starts on page 45. Page 45. So we're talking about impediments to empowerment and economic justice. And he's starting off with the Constitution. So he's basically setting or educating us on the legal foundation that was set to systematically discriminate blacks or to exclude blacks from gaining any type of significant wealth as a group to be competitive against whites, Asians, Hispanics, or any other group that would come into America. He keeps telling us that Black America, the plan, and his belief that the plan is for Black America to be totally relegated to an underclass. That means we are nothing more than the labor class. And at some point, when our labor is no longer needed, we will be excluded and excommunicated from society. That's what he believes, right? That one of the overall goals of white supremacy is to totally cripple Black America, to remain dependent so Black America can be swept away. And I believe that's why a lot of these other groups are coming in the numbers that they are coming in. Now, I don't believe that that's the total reason, but I do believe that is one reason that Black America is and will be replaced by other groups. And we are so late in the game at this point because we've never done the proper things for ourselves to make sure that we are a powerful group of people. That's why we have to get active in our communities. If you're just on YouTube talking, that's not enough. If you're just on YouTube watching, that's not enough. What are you actively doing in your community on a regular basis to make things better? Right? These are things like, there's nothing wrong with the digital content, but digital content can only go so far. We have to get active in the communities to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do. But we got to learn how to work together. But we also need to learn the game and learn our enemy. And that's what we are here to do on these Mondays on the Shoulders of Giants, is to learn the game, learn ourselves, and learn our enemies so we can best be able to move on this chessboard. Because right now, I've been telling people for years, white people are playing chess, Asian people are playing chess, Hispanic people are playing Monopoly, probably, I don't know. But whatever game they're playing is definitely better than the game we're playing, right? But black people are playing Uno at the chessboard with our cards turned backwards. We're not even playing the right game. And the game we are playing, we're giving up all of our moves because we don't understand how to play the game. We never learned how to play the game. We just jumped in it. Or, we was thrown into this game, rather. We was thrown into this game and we have never been given the rules, and we've never tried en masse to figure out the rules. There have been those who've come to show us the rules, like Dr. Anderson, but do we take the lessons and utilize them? Or do we just consume the information for intellectual masturbation? All right, but let's get back into it. So we are on page 46, the third paragraph, obstacle 1. Constitutional racism, termites in the foundation. The Constitution has formed the foundation for the subordination and exploitation of Black Americans by perpetuating racist attitudes and hurtful behavior towards Blacks. The Constitution espoused values of individual rights, freedom, and opportunities, but gave slaveholders the legal right to deny Blacks their personal freedom to benefit their own labor. Further, since the farmers of the Constitution did not consider Blacks full human beings, they did not assign them individual rights. Thus, Blacks were never really meant to be included in the Constitution at all. Professor Harold Cruz spoke of this tragedy by stating, "The legal constitution of American society recognizes the rights, privileges, and aspirations of the individual. While America has become a nation dominated by the social powers of various ethnic and religious groups, the reality of the power struggles between competing ethnic or religious groups is that an individual has few rights and opportunities in America that are not backed up by the political and social power of one group or another." Individual power, like Dr. Amos Wilson keeps telling us, individual power comes from group power. America is in principle a majority rule society. However, in areas of the country where Blacks constituted the majority of the population, all manner of legal and illegal means have been used to ensure that they nevertheless cannot wrest control from whites. Whether Blacks were the majority population in Mississippi, Louisiana, South Carolina, or any cities of many urban areas, a white minority controlled the halls of government. The farmers declared the nation to be a democracy while operating a southern plutocracy, a government run by a wealthy class of plantation owners. And what he's saying is true. We often find evidence of areas where Blacks dominate the population, but whites still are in control. And that's sad. We still haven't learned. Like Dr. Barbara Sizemore say, Black people still don't get it. And make sure you check out that video tomorrow, my Dr. Barbara Sizemore, the final piece of her lecture. Check it out tomorrow, 1 o'clock. In 1786, the farmers of the Constitution laid the legal foundation for a Black-white wealth and power imbalance by 1, counting Blacks as 3/5 of a person. 2, postponing for 20 years the effective date of outlawing the slave trade. And 3, obliging the government to defend fugitive slave laws and to use its forces to suppress Black insurrections and violence. The federal government was a co-conspirator in Black slavery. The Constitution placed white wealth interest over Black personal rights because the farmers were wealthy, conservative white men. More than 31% of the delegates to the Philadelphia Convention were slaveholders who together owned approximately 1,400 slaves. The farmers were idealists, but they were also racist. James Madison and George Washington were 2 of the larger and more prosperous of the constitutional delegates. The capital investments in slaves would be worth approximately $105 million today. 105 million today. They and their fellow delegates protected their own slave investments and the nation's free labor system. The delegates believed that Black slave labor was necessary for the development of the nation and the prosperity of white Europeans in this country. The farmers spoke out against the concentrated power in the hands of the British, but ignored the concentration of power within their own developing aristocratic ranks. The accumulation of all powers in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elected, cautioned James Madison, may justify the pronounced to verify definition of tyranny. If the concentration of power in the British hands constituted tyranny, why was it not so when it was constituted in the hands of the white colonists? Blacks became permanent victims of a tyrannical majority when their own lowly role was inscribed into the founding documents. The farmers obviously did not foresee a time when blacks would be anything other than slaves. The Constitution fused the broad concept of property, ownership, and related rights with English slave laws. Once blacks were classified as property, the English insisted that slaves as property had no rights beyond the rights to perform as requested. The farmers codified in the Constitution their belief that property ownership rights were superior to slaves as human rights. As slave owners, many of the farmers believed in the Old English law that whomsoever discovers or owns a person or thing has inherited rights over them. So he's telling you the foundation of America. That's why I always say America was founded upon slavery. Of course, we already know that because this is in the 1700s, and we know this all started in these lands in the 1600s, right? So this is in the 1700s. So we're looking at the foundation of America and the foundation of codified, legal, constitutional racism, white supremacy in America. White supremacy didn't start in America, but white supremacy is found all throughout the foundation of America, all throughout it. The second obstacle, racism in the Supreme Court and the legal system. The Supreme Court has been a major player in the denigration of blacks. It has exercised powers that the Constitution never gave it in order to override the U.S. Congress in the famous 1857 Dred Scott decision that concluded that blacks had no rights. The Supreme Court made itself co-equal to the U.S. Congress and began issuing rulings that declared congressional acts to aid blacks were unconstitutional. According to the Constitution, courts were supposed to be sanctuaries of judicial objectivity, fairness, and justice. It is ironic then that for nearly 200 years, only wealthy white male lawyers served in the high court. And even today, they are the overwhelming dominant class of judges and justices. The judicial system cannot be fair and impartial to all citizens because judges' decisions naturally reflect their experiences and beliefs. How fair and impartial to all is a judicial system that is composed of 99% conservative white males, right? How unbiased are the court's decisions when the judges are appointed or elected because of their social and political ideologies? The Supreme Court's interpretive freedom is both its strength and its weakness, because as political appointees to the justices to the same extent reflect the views and philosophies of the appointing president and to seek to maintain the status quo. In his book, A People's History of the United States, historian Howard Zinn lamented the court's biased class interest, stating that despite its look of somber, black-robbed fairness, the Supreme Court was doing everything it could for the ruling elite. Only the politically naive would believe the presidents would appoint individuals to the Supreme Court who would not hold social political views on race matters that were similar to those of the president. During the 1980s, the litmus test for the judicial appointments was support for the conservative cause on race matters as drawn from the Constitution and not case proceedings. The conservative slap in the face to Black America was the appointment of Clarence Thomas, a Black man, to the Supreme Court. Thomas, an ultra-right-wing conservative, sees the world through the eyes of the white farmers of the Constitution rather than those of Black America. Former President George Bush said Clarence Thomas was the most qualified candidate in the country who knew what was to be poor. In a Washington Post article, And this article was published on April 18th of 1994. Columnist Jack Anderson disagreed with George Bush on both accounts. According to Anderson, Thomas's writings and decisions denote someone who detains the downtrodden and is callous about protecting civil liberties. Thomas's core opinions supporting the beating of handcuffed prisoners, gender discrimination and selected juries, and denial of immigration rights to Black Haitian refugees show him to be a judicial activist whose legal interpretations parallel the views of the drafters of the Constitution. Supreme Court decisions are based on the Constitution. But since the original intent of the Constitution was to enslave Blacks and to deny them their humanity, fairness for Blacks is impossible. To change conditions and make them sympathetic to Black goals of empowerment and wealth would be to drastically change the intent of the farmers. If judges rely on original intent, Blacks would have no rights. And this is what he's getting at with it. So now we're getting more into the foundation. Now we're talking more into the legal aspect of the founding of America and the legal aspects of white supremacy being a part of that, right? So how to back it up, how to enforce it. This is how to set the laws, set the rules, set the standards, and enforce them and reinforce them, right? Whites are here and Blacks are here. In order to keep Blacks here, we create these laws and we enforce these laws, and we put people in place who are on our side doing our bidding and who will enforce these laws for us. Systematic. We're learning what systematic racism is. Obstacle 3, absence of group economics and capitalism. The practice of perceiving and acting on issues and events from a social rather than a capitalistic perspective is a major impediment to Black empowerment. An old adage says, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Blacks are in America, and America is a capitalist nation. Thus, Blacks will have to adopt the American capitalistic approach if they are to build an economic strength. The founding fathers intended this nation to be an experiment in capitalism. Dr. William E.B. Du Bois, the prominent Black scholar, once described the concept to a Black audience in Atlanta. He said, capitalism is like having 3 ears of corn. You eat one, you sell one, and you save one seed for the next year's planting. Using Du Bois's definition is a measuring device. Blacks have yet to practice capitalism. Black people are neither producers or savers, primarily are consumers. And that is one of our biggest issues is we consume. And one of the reasons we consume is because we want to reflect that what is white. Whiteness is success. And whatever white people want to do, whatever white people do, we want to do. And whatever they have, we want to have. So we consume, so we can reflect their image. Blacks spend 95% of their annual disposable income with businesses located within white communities. Of the 5% that remains within Black communities, another 3% is spent in non-Black owned businesses. It is difficult, if not impossible, for Black communities to maintain a reasonable quality of life and be economically competitive when only 2% of their annual disposable income remains within Black communities. Conditions in Black communities are made worse by the fact that too many Black business owners believe that developing their businesses, but not the Black community. They are short-sighted in valuing temporary business development above long-term community development. USA Today reported on April 11, 1994, that of approximately $99 billion that went to Black businesses from government set-aside contracts, nearly all of the Black businesses were located in white communities. The tax revenue and jobs from these government contracts went into white rather than Black communities. Best supporters of the program explained that they fostered minority businesses, not community development. With Black consumers and Black businesses spending 95% of their income in white communities, whites live comfortably off double incomes, reaping 100% of their own and 95% of Blacks' income. Essentially, black consumers and businesses and business owners have joined whites in boycotting black communities. Their failure to practice group economics further impoverishes black communities. And a lot of black folk don't even really get it. We don't even really understand what we're doing. And a lot of us do. A lot of black people just don't care. They just out to get theirs, and they're going to get theirs by any means necessary. They took the Malcolm X quote the wrong way, but they just want to get theirs. Rugged individualism. Your individual power is reflected and strengthened and backed by the power of the group that you represent. If your group has no power, then as an individual, you have no power. You may have some success, you may have some money, you may have a little bit of wealth, but you have no power. So you can't do anything with none of that. And you can be controlled by those who actually have power, even if they have less success, less wealth, and all that stuff. So we have to be able to look at the bigger picture. Us not looking at the bigger picture is what's keeping us where we are. And because we are being kept where we are, there's no forward progress, and we keep complaining. The wealth gap, the wealth gap, the wealth gap. We keep complaining about the wealth gap, but don't want to work together. Stop talking about the wealth gap if we're not going to work together. The wealth gap won't close. Look, we're only 13% of the population. If less than 1% of 13 are actually wealthy, we're not talking about anything, right? The 100%, if the 100% of the 13% actually get together and pool our money together, start working together, we can do some things. Look at all that money that those bougie black people gave Kamala. We could do some things if we truly gave a damn. All right. Obstacle 4, pursuing myths and exclusive dreams. To achieve economic power, blacks as a group must redesign civil rights traditions. Blacks are out of sync with the times and are still chasing civil rights. The progress of rethinking our civil rights tradition begins with reexamining America's race problem from the perspective of black economic and political empowerment. The section below explores myths or dreams that are to their detriment. All right, so let's get into these myths and dreams that keep this civil rights myth and this civil rights dream going, that keep us, wishing for a better day. Instead of creating a better day, we keep wishing for a better day. We keep hoping white people get better instead of making things better for us. Myth number 1, integration. Real integration is a dream, but will never come true for blacks. Even if it did, it would not change the nature of black life in America. The reality of integration is that the integrating group loses all self-determination, since all plans and goals must be processed through and approved by the dominant society to which the minority group is integrating. Integration is a detriment to blacks because the larger white society would neither allow blacks to assimilate nor give them assistance to alter the negative marginal conditions in which they live by. Black businesses and individuals situated in and wholly dependent on the continued acceptance and goodwill of white communities are vulnerable and powerless. They cannot change anything in the white communities or businesses because they are only guests. Integrated blacks' conditions are made more precarious by the reasoning that they have little, if any, support within the white community, and they cannot depend upon receiving support from the black community, whose powers were weakened by those who abandoned the community to integrate. Similarly, I'm messing that word up. Similarly, it is difficult for the non-integrated black masses to identify with the integrated few. Therefore, both the integrated and the non-integrated are reinforced powerless by their social divisions. Power flows from the group, the trunk of the tree, not the reverse from the individual or limb to the trunk. So as long as black masses remain powerless, that every black individual remains powerless and vulnerable, even if they or their businesses are integrated. The integration process has major political significance in a large urban areas where blacks are in control of government apparatuses. When blacks are the majority population and are controllers of the government, the last things they should be concerned about are integration and minority development. In a self-destructive It is self-destructive to continue to behave as a powerless minority seeking integration when one's group is the dominant majority population, right? So myth number 2, equal opportunity for all. Black America devotes a significant amount of time and energy chasing the myth of equal opportunity, which was the forerunner of the dream of racial integration. Both the myth and the dream are improbables. Inequality of power and wealth will naturally exist so long as human greed and competition motivate human behavior. On the other hand, the myth of equality does perform an invaluable service for those who hold a disproportionate share of the wealth, power, and material resources. This myth not only keeps Blacks distracted from learning how to increase their share, but it keeps Blacks believing that at least their children or their children's children will have a fair chance at the brass ring. The greatest service that the myth of equality proves for the dominant power holders is the idea that if Blacks are not successful achieving a fair share of power, wealth, and material resources, it is their own fault. Integration and equal opportunity are grounded in the belief that dominant white society will voluntarily share power with Blacks. Yeah, that will never happen. Power is rarely shared, especially between competitive groups. Power holders have no desire for equality. James R. Klugel and Elliot R. Smith in the Research for Beliefs About Equality showed that whites resist change regarding racial inequalities because they tend to classify inequalities that relate to the Black underclass as non-issues. Many whites do not believe that structural limitations impede Blacks. Some even believe that if individuals would coexist in their social peers and stop trying to integrate, inequality would not be an issue. Everyone would then be in common groupings, they reason. Whites will accept Blacks as equals only when Blacks have acquired parity of wealth and power. Pursuing the concept of equality rather than the basis of equality, which is wealth and power, is a quagmire that bogs Blacks down and wastes their time and effort. Myth number 3, eradicating poverty. The way an individual or group perceives itself is a critical determinant of their drive and goals. Though Blacks bear a disproportionate burden of poverty, it is a self-limiting exercise in futility for them to overly identify with poverty programs and policies. Poverty is a given in life. Affluences in poverty is fixed extremes. Both poverty and affluence are horizontal, social, and economic characteristics that inflict themselves on all racial and ethnic groups, regardless of geographic locations. Blacks ought to be realistic in their approach to poverty and poverty politics. Although poverty is a relative state among groups of humans, it is a given fact of life. It cannot be eradicated. Poor people's marches and government-sponsored poverty programs cannot eradicate poverty. And even if government policies and programs could eliminate poverty, the conservative wealthy elite would not allow it to do so. Due to limited Black resources, it will be far more productive to view poverty as a vertical characteristic and concentrate efforts not on eradicating it, but on providing as many Blacks as possible with education, wealth, and power building tools they need to lift themselves out of poverty. Myth number 6 is cultural diversity. Cultural pluralism and diversity have become very popular buzzwords, right? Yet the American melting pot has not proven to be an optical illusion. The American melting pot has proven to be an optical illusion. Cultural diversity is a term used to equate Blacks with other groups, though they are not. As a recent newspaper article reported, the demands of immigrant groups and other diluted and eventually trivialized the very special claims of Blacks for national attention. Blacks are models for ethnic, racial, and gender groups, yes. However, a multicultural or cultural diversity ethic that equates all subculture grievances with those of Blacks believes and neutralizes Blacks' efforts to resolve their unique dilemma. Cultural diversity gives the dominant society unrestricted entry into Black culture, while socially and economically excluding Blacks from white culture. Let me read that again. Cultural diversity gives the dominant society unrestricted entry to Blacks' culture, while socially and economically excluding blacks from white culture. Black culture is allowed to assimilate, though black culture is allowed to assimilate, though blacks cannot. For every ethnic group except blacks, cultural diversity has advantages. Main streets throughout America reflect the nation's cultural diversity by featuring Chinese, Japanese, Mexican, Italian, Greek, French, East Indian, Vietnamese, Cambodian restaurants. These groups have the option to assimilate into the mainstream with their culture intact. They establish other businesses, economics, and other in their own communities. Blacks don't have the belief of an identifiable culture of their very own. A multi-smash of African heritage, soul, and black history is offered as black culture. Cultural diversity or pluralism would be advantageous to them if all things were equal, but they're not. All right. So the fifth myth, black ethnicity. Contrary to the popular rhetoric of social engineers, political pundits, and politicians, blacks are not ethnics. Ethnically, it is the sharing of a common language, religion, culture, and set of racial characteristics. But blacks in this country are an amalgamated racial group. They share the English language, but belong to a very religious group, have no clear-cut culture, and have a racially mixed family tree. Therefore, the concept of ethnicity does not aptly describe blacks and should not be used to merge black interests with those of other groups. There are those with motives who attempt to classify blacks as an ethnic group in order to blame them for not having reached parity with other ethnic groups. The motive to classify blacks as ethnics is political sleight of hand that springs from modern conservatives' attempt to promote their so-called colorblind political strategies. If blacks permit themselves to be classified as an ethnic group, blacks will suffer a major political loss. Leslie McLemore of Johns Hopkins University defined an ethnic group as those who differ culturally from the dominant population but share enough characteristics with the dominant population to be acceptable after a period of time. Apparently, non-black ethnics are viewed as allies of the majority white community because they share common characteristics: non-black skin, immigrant backgrounds, absence of the slavery legacy. Blacks have shared American culture for nearly 400 years and have yet to be melted into this mystical melting pot. Classifying blacks as an ethnic group sets them up for a new round of benign neglect. Myth number 6, sexism is equal to racism, which is bull. The form, degree, and intent of discrimination against blacks and women has always been vastly different and therefore should not be treated equally. Blacks were legally subordinated and exploited as producers of wealth and human comfort for a society that denied them the rights to enjoy the fruits of their labor. Contrarily, women as a protected class enjoyed the fruits of every black worker's labor, but were denied the luxury of laboring with the blacks to produce such fruits. Therefore, sexism is more a class issue and a class struggle. Equating discrimination against women to discrimination against blacks is like comparing a headache with cancer. Being a woman in the same mainstream society may have its challenges, but it can in no manner be compared to being black in America. Yet in the 1970s, two struggles were linked. As one insightful writer noted, the class category of women has placed in the same category as blacks, and not only being oppressed, not as only being oppressed, but as suffering the same degree of segregation, exploitation, and discrimination as blacks. The constitutional violations of the rights of women to equal citizenship were equated with constitutional violations of the rights of blacks. Nothing could be further from the truth. Through such social devices as families, marriages, and racial segregation, white women have had access to the fruits of white males' wealth and power. Blacks have not. That's what I keep telling people. White women are just as complicit in the system of white supremacy as white men. I mean, white women, not black women. White women are just as complicit in the system of white supremacy as white men. From a racial perspective, white women have always had an advantage of enjoying the fruits of racial discrimination and the option of categorically discriminating against blacks. Blacks have never had a counter option of discriminating collectively against women. The women's movement supplanted the black civil rights movement more than a generation ago and has generated a demand for woman power and sisterhood that now serves as a major impediment to black family unity and racial solidarity. It is no accident that every time blacks are on the verge of receiving relief from their oppressive conditions, the women's issues emerges. That is no coincidence. White women are strategically used to help dismantle black movements, black families, and black progress. White women are just as complicit in the system of white supremacy as white men. They are strategically used. They were strategic in co-opting all of the movements that blacks were in. They come in as allies, and then next thing you know, you fighting for what the white women fighting for. You're not even fighting for what black people fighting for no more. White women are strategically used to dismantle black progress, empowerment, and anything else that we want to do. Both conservatives and liberals support the issue to dilute elements to blacks. Excuse me. Both conservatives and liberals support the issue to dilute entitlements to blacks. The first attempt by women to press their own cause to the detriment of blacks occurred in 1870. Women tried to push Congress to write them into the Constitution under the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which were specifically enacted to ensure that freed slaves had equal rights under the law. Shortly after emancipation, Congress passed the 15th Amendment that ensured equal voting rights for all citizens regardless of race, color, and previous conditions of servitude. Women's attempts to have gender included in the amendment failed. Reasonable congressmen felt that the Civil War had not been fought over the status of women, but for the freedom of 5 million black slaves. Women were not included in the 1860s constitutional amendments because they had not ever been excluded from society. The original Constitution did not make references or exclude gender. Supreme Court Justice Joseph Bradley wrote in an 1873 editorial that man is or should be woman's protector and defender. And throughout history, social customs have assigned women to a special privileged and protected class. Therefore, women did not need a special amendment. Some women's suffrage groups openly criticized Congress for its exclusion of women from the 15th Amendment. One prominent white feminist was Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Used strong racist and elitist arguments against placing the enfranchisement of black males above the concerns of white women. According to author Eric Forner, Stanton said, "Think of Sambo, who does not know the difference between a monarchy and a republic, who never read the Declaration of Independence, making laws for Lydia Maria Child, Loretta Mott, and Fanny Kimball. The feminist attacks attempted to drive wedges between black women and black men. Stanton spoke out in support of voting rights for white members of the sisterhood. The black women, she contended, would be better off as the slave of an educated white man than of a degraded, ignorant black one." I'm just saying, and they be out here acting like they allies. It's historical. Like, we have historical evidence to show that white women en masse have not been allies to black people or even black women. Black women have been used as tools, as attack dogs against black men for white women. Why do white women have to get their hands dirty when they could just get black women to do it? Black women fell for the okie doke. So, yeah. So the last myth is black feminism. The popular feminist movement has injured relationships between black women and black men. The sophisticated use of racism and capitalism has placed black women in a position of being a major competitor of black men for jobs, education, housing, and other services and necessary resources. said Haki R. Mahabuti in his book, Black Men Obsolete, Single, Dangerous. Mahabuti explained the conflict between black men and black women, saying, Black women did not place themselves in this delicate position as a ward of the system. They have been maneuvered and strategically used for the benefit of the white majority, just as the black man has. Although their gains have not been quite as spectacular as those of white females, black females have improved their historical advantage over black males. Black women have always always been more acceptable to the dominant white society. As with white feminism, black feminism has always been present, but has been fairly low key. Black women have always been able to find work when black males could not. They were more preferable because they were less threatening. Black women were also beneficial for government reporting purposes, since a black female counts as both a black female and as a black. In 1954, the income of black women surpassed black males, and the income gap has continued to widen. Black women could work, go to school, socialize, and breed with whites when black males could not. Slavery intentionally placed black women in matriarchal roles in order to dominate black men. Not only did such role reversals weaken the black family structure, they also placed the black female in closer physical and symbolic proximity to the white male. And black males do out-earn black women. Just put that out there. Black males do out-earn black women, but our relationship with our woman is fucking fractured. It's the only way I can say it. White males' power position afforded them sexual access to black females. A white male with a black female mistress was an acceptable part of Southern life and was part of the rights of manhood for young white males. Black males who were forced into a status below the black females were totally powerless to protect black females. And black men, and let me just say this, black men in America have never been in a power position. We've never been in a position to totally protect the black female. Never been in that position. Both black men and black women have always been in subservient positions. Today, the rise of the black sisterhood has the potential to be a divisive and destructive social phenomenon that could impede black self-empowerment. And we can see that it has. Dr. Claude is being prophetic because the black sisterhood empowerment, this black girl magic, has definitely driven a wedge between black men and black women. The black sisterhood here refers to black women who have indirectly joined the white males and white females to further depress black males. Using black females to subordinate black males places the race where it was centuries ago. In slavery, female slaves were typically field drivers who set the work pace and tasks for male slaves. Though many worked alongside of the male slaves, they were usually given the easier management jobs supervising children's crews and trash gangs. Within the household, black females were typically the surrogate overseers of the entire yard staff, as well as the slaveholders' young children. The black female's advice was sought and accepted in family and household matters. Up until the civil rights period, the black female's domestic authority was extended only through the white master and mistress. So the white man and the white woman gave black women preference, not power. Not power. They didn't give the black woman power because the black woman has no power, just like the black man has no power, but they gave the black woman preference. Less threatening and easier to control. At obstacle 5, this is the last obstacle. Criminalizing blacks. Systematic racism is alive. The criminalizing of blacks, especially black males, is a major obstacle to black empowerment for at least 3 reasons. 1, American society has long linked crime to blacks, especially young black males. 2, blacks have been forced to live in marginal social conditions that produce pathological survival behavior. And 3, black communities lack an accountability mechanism that could establish, reward, and punish behavior that is detrimental to them. Since the late 1960s, blacks have been so overexposed to black crime within their communities that they not accept it as normal black behavior. And we accept a lot of degenerate behavior as normal black behavior. National public policies and institutions began centuries ago to produce and perpetuate the laws, racial images, and myths that imprison blacks within the concepts of crime and violence. For blacks, criminal justice has never been blind. White society criminalized black behavior out of fears of financial self-interest. According to Leonard Curry, the author of The Free Black The Free Black in Urban America, 1800 to 1850, blacks were arrested for activities that would not have been a crime for whites, such as strolling in certain neighborhoods and looking suspicious. Sometimes blacks were imprisoned for even less specific crimes, such as violating various city ordinances and playing games with whites. In some instances, no crimes were committed. White planters would commit blacks to prison just for safekeeping. All of these incarcerations showed up in records as black crimes against society. An abusive use of the legal system to criminalize blacks primarily occurred in urban areas where the white power structure had fewer options for controlling and using blacks. As far back as 1826 in Massachusetts, free blacks were less than 1% of the population, but nearly 17% of the prisoners. In Pennsylvania, blacks were 2% of the population, but nearly 34% of the prisoners. And in New Jersey, blacks were only 2% of the population, but nearly 50% of the prisoners. Today, blacks still make up 35 to 50% of state or federal penal total population. Approximately 37% of America's black male population is either in jail or on parole or probation. The criminalizing phenomena has destroyed black individuals, families, and communities. And remember, this book was written this book was written, remember this book was written. This book was published. Okay, so this book was published in 1994. So remember, these statistics are statistics from the 90s. So don't be in the comments. These statistics ain't up to date. We know it's a book that was published in 1994. If American justice were to ever be colorblind, crime would have to be redefined and fairly enforced. For instance, white lawbreakers would not be treated any differently for their white-collar crimes than blue-collar criminals. The term white-collar crime was coined in 1940 and referred to illegal acts carried out by respectable members of the community or persons of high status in the course of their occupations. And white-collar crimes are usually nonviolent crimes carried out by respectable people to gain money, property, or personal benefits through deceit. John Fairley stated in his book, Sociology, that white-collar crimes cost the society from 40 to 200 billion a year, not including the savings and loan thefts. This is 8 times the cost of all common blue-collar crimes. Yet, our prisons are 99% filled with blue-collar criminals who are predominantly black. The greatest impediment to black empowerment and economic justice has been the Constitution, which institutionalized the relative social and economic status of blacks and whites and codified racism in America. After using the Constitution to expropriate black labor, create a racial ordering of acceptability, and foster a wealth and power imbalance between blacks and whites, the government and the court systems are now using the Constitution to impede any effort to correct the disparities. The government and the courts now allege that any preferential treatment of blacks would be unconstitutional reverse discrimination. The Constitution ought to be just as supportive or tolerant of affirmative action, set-asides, and preferential treatment for blacks as it has been for whites. Indeed, in all their wisdom, the drafters of the Constitution had to have known that discrimination against blacks was in fact preferential treatment for whites, laying the groundwork for systematic, fundamental racism in America. All areas of human activity, white supremacy dominates. This was just a few areas. All areas of human activity, white supremacy dominates and will continue to dominate until we choose otherwise. But we must understand how the game is played. We must understand the rules. We must read the rules. We must study the rules, learn the rules, digest the rules. Not become the rules, though, but understand them and learn the loopholes and learn how to get around the rules and learn how to use the rules for our own gain. But also we must strengthen ourselves as a people, empower ourselves as a people. Every day you should be working to better yourself. Every single day. Every relationship that you have with yourself or anybody else, you should be working to better every day so we can become a stronger group of people and not continue to be stepped on. We're continuously sliding down the social stratus pole, the social order pole, socioeconomic pole. We're sliding down. It's getting worse and worse and worse and worse for us. What are we going to do about it? Damn it. What are we going to do? Do you give a damn? And if you don't, that's a problem. Remember to like this video, comment, subscribe, share. And remember, I might almost drop my pen, but if you don't like this video, then you ain't a black person. If you don't like this video, show you my pen almost dropped. If you don't like this video, you ain't black. All right, so we just read chapter 3 from pages. I can't grip the pages. All right, from page 45 to 64 is chapter 3. Pages 45 to 64 is chapter 3. Chapter 4, why whites choose to enslave blacks. That will go from page 65 to 85. Chapter 4 is 60. Next week's video, chapter 4, is pages 65 to 85. Why whites choose to enslave blacks. Impediments to empowerment and social economics. We are within a system that is designed to work against ourselves, but we must also stop working against ourselves to be better. Love you all. Remember, like this video, comment, subscribe, and share. Love you all. Catch y'all next week or the next video that come up. See y'all tomorrow. All that stuff. Love y'all.